The Cabinet meeting being held on the 10th of September. Can we start at the beginning of the agenda with membership of the Cabinet? I think we are all here bar Viv, Councillor Viv Kendrick. But all other Cabinet members are here. Okay, thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. Can we agree those as a correct record? Thank you. Show of hands. Thank you. Admission, item 3, admission of the public. I don't think that, well, all items will be held in public today. There's nothing that we can see at the moment that we need to go into private session for. Any declarations of interest? No, everyone's nodding no. Okay, thank you. So no declarations of interest. Deputations and petitions?
None received, yeah.
None, thank you. And questions by members of the public?
No, we don't.
None of those received either. So we are straight into item 7. There's 30 minutes for this item, and it's questions by elected members. Is the order that I've been given the order that they're going in, or? Yeah, take them this one. Okay. Well, top of the list is Martin Bolt, Councillor Bolt.
Thanks very much for that. About 20 years ago, this council granted planning approval for a contiguous, huge development in Mirfield. Originally known as Mirfield 25, it's evolved under various names. It is now known as AAA Park. It's on the A62. It's one of the Kirklees strategic economic zones. As part of that development, residents were told that the developers would pay for improvements of the road junction at Stocksbank Road A62 and also for road safety measures in various places. I'm pleased to say that the road safety works at Church Road in Robertstown have been put in, but those at Church Lane and Dunbottle Lane in Mirfield haven't even been designed. How do the public have confidence in the planning scheme when nearly 20 years later the promises haven't been delivered?
Thank you, Councillor Bolt. I certainly remember the scheme, and I certainly remember the conditions that you're talking about. However, 20 years on, I don't think I can comment. I'm not even sure that any of the Cabinet members here would be able to comment on what has happened. I would have to say that I do believe that the public can have full confidence. I'm sure there must be a reason for the changes. Over 20 years, I mean, lots of things happen, don't they? So I'm sure there's a reason, a good reason for and we'll ask officers, I'll ask the Cabinet member to come back to you with a response as to why that's happened. Thank you. No further question on that? No? Okay. Councillor John Lawson.
Thank you, Chair. It's fair to say that there's a lot going on at the moment in Council. A lot of decisions that are coming through budget that are being reviewed and re-examined. To go through some of them are on Cabinet papers today, but we've got the car parking review, libraries, which is on today's papers, the unfolding school transport issues, the closure of Cleckheaton Town Hall and the Dewsbury Sports Centre, and the HWRC call-in later today. Those are the main items that I've picked out of what's going on at the moment. Given all of that, at the back of most of the issues here is the way that evidence is presented and the way that the decisions are presented. Do you think it's a time that we had another look on how we evidenced Cabinet decisions?
I think, could you explain a bit further what you mean by evidence Cabinet decisions?
Okay, so what I mean by that is it time that we shared more information, the information that Cabinet is basing their decisions on, with the public when we're making these announcements and these decisions?
I'll take that. I mean, because it's no one particular portfolio holder's
Sure.
Portfolio. I mean, I would say yes, we already do, John. Any Cabinet report has should I'll say should, because I'm sure you'll find an exception to the rule somewhere, but fully explain any options, the finances, the resources, and any background papers, and it will also detail at the end previous meetings that issue would have been held at. Now, so it is evidenced. You may say that's not transparent enough. So certainly we can have a look at that transparency, because I totally understand that when you get to the end it says background papers and it says a cabinet report of X or whatever, that may not feel transparent enough to certainly a member of the public, though you yourself would know where to go. So we can certainly look at that. I mean, as I think you are aware, we will be holding a review of the Constitution. And whilst obviously some of this isn't actually constitutional, it's practical, isn't it? It's how we, and I can look at Marcus here, it's how we actually display information both on the website and use our comms that go out as well in terms of that transparency. Certainly I'm perfectly happy and willing to not broaden the work that we're doing on the Constitution, but to look at that issue in particular alongside that.
Thank you. So I have a supplementary, if that's okay. I'm glad you picked up on the transparency issue there. One of those issues, of course, is with ward members. That will come out to play, I'm sure, in the rest of the day's debates, in this meeting and in others. And I'm glad you picked up on transparency, because I just wanted, by terms of illustration around transparency, to ask you, in millions, could you illustrate for me how much is being saved by all the items that I've just mentioned, and stack that up against the write-off against Huddersfield Town, the write-off there against the debt, and the land acquisition bill for the Huddersfield blueprint? Are those available off the top of your head?
Asking the last question first, no, they're not off the... I know what you're talking about, but certainly I couldn't talk about any write-off of debt or land acquisition in detail of any sort, or give you any assurance. And to be honest, I think that's still a work in progress, if you see what I mean. And it isn't something that we can be totally transparent about just at the moment. But in terms of all councillors, I will acknowledge that perhaps all our communication with ward councillors on different issues hasn't been as good as it could have been, and perhaps should be, on certainly some issues, if not, well, I won't say if not all issues, because I'm sure there are issues which some ward members do feel perfectly informed about. But please bring any particular instance to us.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of our residents realise the financial constraints that the council's under. They realise that the big asks aren't going to happen, and it is a question as a ward councillor of managing expectations. But a lot of us, I'm sure everybody sat here, will have the issues over fly tipping. My inbox is full of reports of fly tipping that hasn't been picked up, and that's maybe weeks after it's been reported. So can you tell me what is the target from when somebody reports in fly tipping on the website to it being picked up? Thank you.
In the actual terms of the detail of this, I'm afraid I'm going to ask Councillor Ahmed, sorry, to respond on that actual target.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. There is no specific target, but we do tend to deal with the actual issues as soon as we can. As you know, that there are, in terms of the budget with highways, the demand is far exceeding the actual budget and the amount that we've got. But we do endeavour to try and deal with as many of those inquiries as soon as we can. But there is no specific target, but we do it within the timescales.
Any supplementary?
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask, if there is no sort of standard target, does Kirklees actually maintain any sort of figures of how many weeks, months it is before fly tipping is removed after being reported? And also, have you noticed that it's getting longer in sort of the last 6 to about, I would even say, a year? Thank you.
Councillor Ahmed. Councillor Crook.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Joe, for your question. I think what we have evidenced through the data that we do retain on fly tipping is that there's been an increase in fly tipping over recent months and years. The team reports back to councillors on a regular basis and provides a report with pictures of the before and after so that we can see the performance in terms of the clean-up that's done when they do get to an instance of fly tipping. In terms of how we manage the increased demand, that's something that we'd need to get back to you on, because clearly if the demand continues to increase, and not in relation to the item we'll be discussing later today, if the demand does continue to increase, then we may need to look at additional resource allocation to cover that. But thank you for the question.
Councillor Safdar.
According to the Trussell Trust, there's been a increase in food bank usage across the north of England, and as you're aware, I'm sure members from all political groups are incredibly concerned about the impending increase in gas and electric prices that are on the way. With temperatures dropping, we are concerned about our residents, especially those with special needs, disabilities, and those who are carers. So that's the first part of the question. What are we doing as a council to provide extra support, especially in light of possible reduced help from central government? And linking into that, what provisions are we going to put in place now to help hard-working organisations like the Mission and various religious groups working hard to provide food parcels? So it's a double strategy we're asking for. How we're going to help people with emergency food parcels, and how we're going to tackle the anxiety and worries around increased fuel prices this winter.
There's a lot of different things in that, actually, Councillor Safdar, but absolutely, of course, agree with the sentiment of what you're saying, and yes, one of the first things that any council has to do, but this one in particular, is to protect the most vulnerable in our society. And I am pleased to say that the Labour government has said that they are going to continue with the Household Support Fund, which certainly has been supporting our food banks, including the Welcome Centre. But I'll hand over to Councillor Hawkins for a fuller response.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Safdar, as well, for the question. Just in the line of that, the Household Support Fund has been used over the past few years to provide cost of living support to the most vulnerable residents in Kirklees, and as I say, it's really heartening to hear that that's continuing into the future, that support's going to be needed going into the future still, and it's a lifeline for not just for vulnerable people in Kirklees, but also for the organisations who support them. The Welcome Centre, things like Uniform Exchange that I went and helped out with over the summer, they really do depend on the Household Support Fund, and with that continuing, that support's going to continue as well.
Thank you. Any supplementary?
Yes, of course, we welcome the Household Support Fund and such measures, but the figures are worrying now. We've never seen so many residents turning to the Trussell Trust for fuel poverty and food bank support. So is there any extra support as a local authority, or maybe working with the regional authority, that we're considering as a council, apart from the House Support Fund?
As you know, resources are incredibly tight, and certainly the budget that we are working to at the moment was one that was set earlier this year, in March this year. We won't be able to deviate from that budget, a bit like the Labour government. But we have got a report later on the agenda on our medium-term financial strategy. So, but we will. We won't necessarily be able to find financial resources, but you can rest assured, I think, that anyone or any resident that is affected by a continuing cost of living crisis will be continued to be supported in the best way that we can. Thank you. Councillor Bramwell.
Dewsbury Sports Centre has been closed now for over a year, and it is having a continued significant negative impact on residents across North Kirklees. At the last Cabinet meeting, I raised this issue and Councillor Turner gave an update stating that they are waiting on a report to be fed back. I am asking for an update since the last Cabinet meeting, if there is one, and at what process they are in right now.
Thank you for that. I'll hand over to Councillor Turner for that response.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Bramwell. The costings, we've got the costings that we were looking at for the Dewsbury Centre. That is now being prepared into a report, which will follow the normal path for such reports through the Council's procedures.
Any supplementary?
On Saturday the 15th, which is this week, there will be a public meeting regarding Dewsbury Sports Centre, and it will be run by the Save Dewsbury Sports Centre campaign. I am asking, are any Cabinet members intending to attend this public meeting this week?
Sunday the 15th, I think, but Councillor Turner.
I'm not intending to attend. I didn't know this meeting was going to be held until I was told by a senior officer yesterday morning, and unfortunately short notice I have commitments on Sunday.
That's all the questions I've been noting. Oh, sorry. Councillor Bolt?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The Council is partnering with Network Rail Transpennine Route Upgrade on a project to stimulate active travel in what's called the first and last mile. As the name says, it's encouraging people to walk and cycle for the first or last mile of a journey to and from a railway station. There was a drop-in session in Murfield with very limited time for people to respond and even more limited information on the project. For example, it didn't have any baseline data on the number of people who walk or cycle to Murfield railway station. So the first question is, how would Cabinet judge the success of a project if it didn't know the starting point? And I highlighted, because all of a sudden we see a plan which had not been publicised before to use part of the canal towpath from Shepley Bridge into Murfield, which has some very low bridges and narrow paths. I raised issues about safety concerns. Nobody had any risk assessments. Have the Cabinet seen any of these when bringing forward the plans?
I'm going to hand over to Councillor Crook for that to respond to that.
Thank you, Councillor Bolt, for that question. I think the first and last mile initiative's a really positive way that we can encourage active travel adoption in our borough. I'm absolutely in support of that. I don't know what the measures of success would be, to answer your first question, in terms of the attendance to the consultation. It's often very difficult to encourage people to come to consultations, and I'm not familiar with that particular one, so I don't know how the comms went out around that. I did have a briefing yesterday on another engagement event to do with the transport plan from Wicker, and I don't know whether this was a West Yorkshire Combined Authority engagement or a Kirklees one or a Transpennine one or a partnership or whatever, so I can look into that and get back to you with what the parameters would be in terms of considering that a success. On using towpaths for active travel routes, I think that's a really good idea. We've got flat, level ground next to canals, so that seems an obvious choice, and it's also separate from vehicle traffic, which encourages people, encourages uptake and improves usage. I'm not aware of the particular physical constraints that you're referring to on that section of towpath. I would imagine, I would hope, that the bridges and so on had been designed to allow horses to pass in the first place, so perhaps that would indicate that there might be a possibility to make there room for a bicycle or walkers, but I don't know. I'd have to get back to you on specifics. If you drop me an email about the specific path, I'm happy to look into that further. Thanks.
Thank you. Supplementary.
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor Crook. I wouldn't give the blanket statement that it's a good idea to cycle on towpaths because, as with a lot of the infrastructure, they are different. There are some which are very suitable because of the width, and I've pointed out to your colleagues on either side of you a section where I believe a towpath would not only enhance the network but provide relief and mitigation when the Transpennine route upgrade gets rid of Colliery Bridge. That's a very wide towpath. The one in Murfield at this point is probably about 2 feet wide, and the pavings have been eroded with the very horses' hooves that you mentioned. The difference is that often you didn't get contraflow horse traffic, you didn't have the problems with the barge ropes crossing and things like that. So yeah, I will email you, but while we're here, can I invite you to come and cycle the route with me? Then you can experience it firsthand.
Thanks very much for the invitation, Martin. I'd be very happy to have a day out cycling with you if we can find the time in our busy schedules. I mean, I'm not saying that all towpaths are appropriate. I'm saying there are certain characteristics which are, characterised by towpaths that make them an obvious choice for looking at as active travel routes. And I hope we continue to expand that network in the one that you suggest. And to my colleagues either side of me, let's hope that that's part of the route going forward. But yeah, a cycling day out. Let's have a picnic.
I hope you've all got bikes. Oh, but no, I think that I'm sure you can provide the bikes, Martin, if need be. John Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not actually sure who this is for, but it's about buses, whoever takes buses. So I've been contacted by a couple of residents in Grangemore about the X41 service, which is a bus service that runs from Dewsbury through Grangemore, then down through into Huddersfield, and some of them go the other way and go through into Middlestown. It was a bus service that originally was provided by Arriva, then Arriva withdrew, and it's been provided by the South Pennine Community Transport. But they're talking of withdrawing the service now. Now, this was a service that was deemed to be an essential rural route. It is receiving subsidy from the mayoral authority. We've been trying to engage with the mayoral authority. They've referred it to the buses team, but we haven't had any answers, and the community are obviously concerned about they're going to be cut off if the bus service does get withdrawn, particularly that residents need to get the bus to get into Middlestown because that's where the surgery is. And I'm just wondering if I can get some help in trying to get to the bottom of what is being talked about, and let's make sure that we can keep this essential service going for obvious reasons. Thank you, Chair.
I'm not sure that we've got a detailed answer to that, but certainly we can help. But I think Councillor Crook wants to come in.
Thank you, John, for that question. I mean, it is really sad that we're losing so many rural bus services. I mean, I've seen the loss of service in my ward as well, and as the transport portfolio holder, I do see lists of bus services when they're withdrawn. I would say that the franchising process, which has begun and will take some time to bear fruits, will allow us to dictate what services we want to be run, and that will help us to ensure that rural services are maintained hopefully in a better way, and best use of subsidy in those cases. I think you'd identified that this was already a subsidised route by the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. If you want specific detail on this route, I would by all means email me or email Councillor Firth, who's Deputy Chair of the West Yorkshire Combined Authority Transport Committee, and he'll be able to get you specific answers on that specific route.
Thank you. I'll email both of you.
No supplementary. Are there no further questions? Councillor Bramwell.
The youth services, that are currently being delivered by Kirklees Council, I'm asking basically what the plan is for youth services, especially for the north of Kirklees. The antisocial behaviour that we're seeing in Dewsbury West, particularly in my ward, in young people, is across from Dewsbury Moor to Ravensthorpe, Ravensthorpe to Westborough, Westborough to West Town, and so on. I have spoken with the detached youth work team, who told me that their plan of engagement is changing constantly. There is no longer anything like place-based working anymore, because we lost so many centres due to the first cut to service over a decade ago. I know that there's grassroots organisations that are working and trying to implement as much as possible, so I'm just asking what the council is doing to support the grassroots organisations working already, and what is the council's youth service offer?
That is a very detailed question. Oh, there's a long, very long answer to that. I mean, and historic as well. I mean, certainly our youth services have been cut back over the last, well, certainly since 2010, due to the budget constraints that we did have, and still continue to suffer. But I do know that certainly children's services, it's one of the things that we've been really careful and determined to protect services to youth as much as possible. For more, well, I can't really give you much more detail than that, but I'm just going to, Councillor Kendrick could give you some more detail. I'm just going to ask Councillor Pinnock if she can.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to give any more detail at this time, but you've raised a really good question about our youth services. And just like, you know, the information that you provided in respect of your ward, it is quite similar across other wards. In terms of ward funding as councillors, I know in my ward we've supported a lot of grassroots organisations, and I'm sure you've probably done the same in your areas, and likewise with other councillors here. There is other funding as well in respect of the Police Violence Reduction Unit and other funding, other national funding that's available to organisations. I think what would be helpful is if you could provide me with some more detail. I think what you're referring to there in respect of antisocial behaviour, and sometimes it's not clear whether it's particularly a police matter or whether it's a council matter, depending on the circumstances, but it shouldn't matter. Both organisations or institutes should be working together anyway for the betterment of our young people. So I'm more than happy really to sit with you or to provide some more detail, because I'm particularly interested in how we address these issues going forward.
I think Councillor Addy also wants to come in there.
Just in addition, obviously the youth service is a very specific service, but in public health we are looking at ways to encourage people to be more active. That doesn't necessarily mean playing sport, just getting out, meeting up. That will include young people, of course, and through that we hope to work with partners to increase the offer in North Kirklees, and specifically starting in those areas where things are most difficult.
Thank you. And just to add to that, because we've also continued to provide the holidays schemes as well, despite reducing finances or funding for that. Councillor Pinnock?
Sorry, I just wanted to mention an event on the 13th. I hope you've been invited to that, and I hope you're going along to that event. I can send you some detail. It's at the university, and it's to do with youth crime prevention. And it involves a number of institutes and stakeholders working together, and young people, inviting young people to sit down, listen to what's been said, but also allow young people to feed back on the issues, some of the issues they have, particularly around things like safety, crime and antisocial behaviour. So I'll be sending you an invitation to that. I go every year. I think it's been running for about 5 years, and it's put on by Local Services to You. Like I said, the police are there, we've got the council there, we've got detached youth workers, we've got community groups going. Everybody comes together because we have a common goal, which is to try and eradicate crime, antisocial behaviour, particularly knife crime. So I'll be sending you that information.
Is that supplementary to it? Thank you. That's supplementary.
Thank you for the feedback from both Cabinet members. So when it comes to our youth offer as a council, and you just touched on it a little bit then, I think that we should highlight the good. So the HAF programme that you've just mentioned during the summer holidays is a lifeline and has been absolutely incredible for local families. One thing that I don't think the council does get right, and please correct me if I am wrong, is about the preventative measures. When it comes to engaging with our young people, I think the detached youth work team that was on offer was absolutely fantastic, because they went in and they went into the community and they engaged with young people on their turf, in their areas, at the times that they were out. But where I think that we do fail is focusing on the preventative measures, engaging with young people from a young age. That's as young as 6 to 7 year old. So by the time we get to them to an age of 12, 13 and into the adolescent area of their lives, we have already built up a rapport, a great relationship, and we are maintaining and sustaining the work that's been done from years prior.
Thank you. We're almost out of, we are out of time for Councillors' questions, but I will very briefly respond to that. We do focus on preventative work. Again, our community services, the police, youth, Sports England, all sorts of different organisations do work together to work on the preventative, and there is various funding that goes into schools to do courses on violence and knife crime, etc. So it is obviously something that is very close to our hearts. But that is the end of councillor question time now, I'm afraid. So I will move on to the first item on the agenda, which is to present Cabinet with findings from recent informal consultation and other relevant details to enable a decision to be made on the future library service. And I'm going to hand over to Councillor Pinnock for that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So at a previous Cabinet meeting on the 20th of February, it was agreed that an informal consultation engagement exercise should be done with community partners around community-managed libraries. The decision was for officers to assess whether some libraries could be managed in the community by volunteers. The informal engagement exercise has now been done, and this Cabinet report provides feedback following that consultation. It also provides details in respect of asking Cabinet to consider an alternative approach and sets out recommendations and steps following the outcome of that consultation. I would like to thank officers for their many hours of hard work engaging with community partners and stakeholders and preparing this addendum report for us to consider and approve. The BBC research has found that 180 council-run libraries have been shut down or handed to voluntary groups to run since 2016, as local government faces significant funding crisis. We all know how important libraries are to our communities. Kirklees has a sizable number of libraries, second only to Leeds in West Yorkshire, which is a strength but also a significant challenge to continue to resource. In Kirklees, we have 24 libraries with over 838,000 visitors, 860,000 issues, 72,000 IT sessions, 7,000 events, and nearly 12,000 new members in 2023 to 2024. Libraries are not just a place for books, as we know. Libraries are community hubs, they're community spaces, well-being centres, creative assets, they combat loneliness, provide warm spaces, help with fuel poverty, and that's just to name a few of the benefits. Libraries are the only places where anyone can walk into, and no one's going to ask you, what are you doing here? What do you want? Libraries are welcoming environments for everyone, irrespective of their age, gender, race, or social background. In Kirklees, we already have different models of delivery across 24 libraries. Town libraries are generally our busiest libraries and will have more paid staff, but all our libraries have some volunteers in various roles. Our community-supported libraries generally have members of staff, supported by volunteers, with some locations having additional volunteer-only sessions. But we can't escape the budgetary pressures faced by all local authorities. Due to decades of austerity, funding cuts from central government, the cost of living and the mounting economic and societal problems, councils like Kirklees have to make very difficult decisions. Taking all these into account to balance the books, we must make cost savings, but also to retain our library service offer. The proposal previously was for 8 of the 24 libraries to be community-owned, run by volunteers. We have fantastic volunteers based in Kirklees, people who are passionate, committed, with a variety of skills and want to give back to their communities. I would like to thank all our volunteers for their service to Kirklees. Unfortunately, the informal engagement with community partners and stakeholders indicated that the proposed model for some community-led libraries may not work at this time and may not be the right approach. Lack of capacity was a common feature, as well as resource management and skills. In the feedback, some of the volunteers expressed concerns about handling personal and sensitive information, such as in relation to safeguarding and GDPR, which is understandable. Other volunteers were concerned about dealing effectively and safely with vulnerable residents. Again, also understandable. We have listened very carefully to the feedback. In light of the feedback, the Council must now consider what steps to be taken to safeguard library provision in Kirklees. In the meantime, the Council will work with volunteers who are interested in community-managed libraries going forward. The focus now needs to be around libraries remaining as part of the Council's network, but establishing how to make savings and continue to retain support of the library services for the future. Some of this work is already happening. The integrated library service, which involves integrating libraries with customer service centres, commenced weeks ago in Huddersfield and Dewsbury Town Centre. To most people, there will be no visible change. If you walk into one of these libraries, you'll be greeted with staff, face-to-face support will be given, and residents will be signposted where appropriate. In this Cabinet report, the revised proposal acknowledges community feedback and financial constraints. It suggests reducing, not removing, paid staff. Therefore, the proposal seeks Cabinet's approval for a formal consultation on this particular model. An 8-week public consultation will ensure that the revised model meets the legal and community needs. It will gather feedback on preferred times, dates and locations for library access through online and paper surveys, as well as focus groups, ensuring the involvement of key stakeholders. Finally, as a portfolio holder, I am confident that a revised model of delivery and staff structure will help us to achieve not only the shared ambition of retaining the paid staff, but also help us to retain the infrastructure, enabling us to continue to work alongside communities to build upon for the future. It will also support our ambition to provide place-based support. The principle of our asset strategy means people get the support that they need at the right time, in the right place, along with our inclusive community framework. Again, I would like to thank the community and volunteers for providing this detailed feedback to enable us now to embark on a revised alternative model of delivery for libraries and the brilliant and much needed capacity they bring to the library service. Today, Cabinet is asked to consider the following recommendations: to approve the revised targeted library delivery model, retaining some paid staff and also alongside staffing review. Secondly, to endorse the consultation process, to note the integrated impact assessment, and following the outcome of that consultation process, to return to Cabinet for further consultation before implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pinnock. I've got a question from John Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. It's not so much a question as in comments. Broadly, I welcome the report. And I'm glad to see that the administration has listened to the communities and is prepared to put their support behind all of our libraries. But I do think I need to make some comments on what has happened to date. Because there are communities out there, there are groups out there feeling very bruised, feeling as though they've been poorly treated. And we need to reflect on what we got wrong so that we make sure in the future we don't repeat those mistakes. This was poorly communicated. There wasn't active engagement with ward councillors. Ward councillors weren't involved in the consultations. There was no proper impact assessment done of the impact across the communities that were being targeted, and I use that word purposefully because it was a targeted approach where certain communities were having the legs from under them cut. We talked about libraries being left and cut adrift, where the proposal was to withdraw all support, to expect the community to fund the ongoing running costs of their libraries, without any consideration for the impact that was going to have on those communities. What I got in terms of feedback from volunteers was that volunteers were thinking of stopping volunteering, and not just within our libraries, but more broadly. I had volunteers in my ward, the library impact in my ward, Shepley. We also have Cliff House in Shepley has a group of volunteers. We had volunteers that were talking of stopping volunteering at Cliff House because they were worried that Cliff House would be next. And that, well, if they're expecting us to run the library, no doubt soon they'll be telling us they expect us to do more at Cliff House. So we've heard, and Councillor Pinnock mentioned the Inclusive Communities Framework, but clearly the Inclusive Communities Framework wasn't looked at when these proposals were pulled together. They hadn't thought through the broader impact this would have on communities. I remember one elderly gentleman in one of the sessions I attended actually saying, you've only looked at this through one lens. You've only looked at this through the lens of deprivation, because all of the libraries that were targeted were those in perhaps the slightly more affluent areas. We actually have people that use those libraries that are unwell and have severe mobility issues, would have no ability to get to any other library if you put their library at risk. And that hadn't even been thought about. And the officers that came out and spoke, and I do hope that if there are public meetings around this next phase, that this will be fronted by the cabinet members and members of the administration, as well as officers, not just officers. Because the officers that came out and spoke to the communities perhaps weren't as careful as they ought to have been about the language that they used. So just to give you an example, they're coming out and telling the community that they're cutting financial support to that library and expecting this small group of volunteers to come forward and find the funding to keep their library open. And at the same time, they produce and hand out a pile of glossy A4 booklets that talk about what they're doing. And when one of the volunteers, not me, one of the volunteers turned around and said, well, how much did those booklets cost? They were told, oh, they didn't cost anything because we produced them in-house. Now, that, spending money to produce something that wasn't needed at the same time as you're telling people in front of you that there's no money to continue to support the library in that location. It's those sort of things that damage the reputation of this council and damage the reputation of this administration to put forward something like that. So I am pleased to see that you've listened. I will fully engage with this, but can we make sure that we do fully engage all ward councillors, give them the opportunity to engage with this, because at the end of the day we are elected representatives of our communities and we were cut out of the original proposals and original plans. And I had to demand that there was a meeting with myself and my fellow ward councillors. There were meetings, bizarrely, they were meeting with town and parish councillors, but not with Kirklees councillors. So I do hope, Amanda, you take on board the feedback around the way this was badly managed, and we have damaged the trust with our volunteers. And trust is easy to damage, but difficult to rebuild. And we need to be starting that rebuilding exercise now. We need to be a lot more careful about how we communicate with them, what we say to them, and what we present to them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I'm neither myself nor Councillor Pinnock can really comment on some of that detail that that you've raised. Though I think I do have to agree with you that it certainly sounds as if better consultation, etc., could have happened. And I'm glad you said that we have listened, because obviously we have, and I hope you do approve of the recommendations that we've got here going forward with this further consultation. I know you wanted to come back, but can I think Councillor Pinnock just wanted to come in.
Thank you. So just to clarify, it was a targeted piece of work, is my understanding. I wasn't at the Cabinet meeting on the 24th of February, but my understanding was the councillors at the time wanted a targeted piece of work to speak to volunteers and community partners. That was the intention. And the intention was to find out about their capacity and their skills if the opportunity presented itself for them to run 8 of the libraries, community-led libraries. There wasn't an intention for a wider consultation exercise, is my understanding. That information needed to be gathered about capacity as to whether they could actually deliver in those services. And obviously, we've received the feedback now, and we understand it isn't something that's right at the moment for volunteers. And I take your point to what you said about how volunteers felt about, what they could and couldn't do. And that obviously came through from the feedback. So based on the feedback on what was said, we've taken the decision not to pursue that any further and instead look at an alternative model. So just to make that clear, I'm sad to hear what you've said, how volunteers felt about the process. Obviously, that wasn't the intention. We value, as I said, when I was presenting the report, we value volunteers. We certainly couldn't do what we're doing without the help and the assistance of volunteers, and we'll certainly need volunteers going forward into the future. So the point's been made about that, and the next stage now is another piece of work as to an alternative proposal which has been put forward in the report.
Is there a supplementary to that?
Yeah, it's just a response. Thank you. Amanda, I'm in no sense was I getting you at all. You weren't even in the Cabinet then, were you? So, no, I think when I say we talk about the inclusive communities framework, which is about thinking about the impact on everybody about what you're doing, they didn't do that. They didn't think about the impact they were going to have on the people that they were targeting. And I use that word targeting purposefully because that's how the volunteers felt. Why was it my library and not that one down the road? And when they asked officers, they couldn't really give a clear answer to that. So they felt victimised. They felt that they were being treated unfairly. They weren't being treated, everybody wasn't being treated the same. Not everybody was being asked about their capacity to perhaps shoulder a little more of the burden and share it out more fairly and more equally. It was 8 libraries were picked. They were targeted and nobody else was asked to do anything. And that's how people felt. And that's what I mean about we need to get better at the way we communicate. If we've got an inclusive communities framework, we need to damn well use it and think about the impact this has and the broader impact that has on volunteering across Kirklees. Because if you start pushing volunteers to do more, you're likely to see some volunteers peel away and not volunteer. And I don't think they thought any of this through properly, and I'm glad they've had the opportunity to pause, reflect, listen, and let's try and get something right. So I'm fully supportive of what you're trying to do. Devil's always in the detail, so don't expect me not to be back here arguing with you again. but I will do it from a place of wanting it to work. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Bolt, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And thank you to you and Amanda for the report and the changes that are being proposed. It is to be welcomed, and much of the information has already been said. But I must, in welcoming the report, pay tribute to the Friends of Mirfield Library. Volunteers have been mentioned. Mirfield Library has a very active group of friends who put on a variety of events and talks and things, which is not only informative, but it acts as a great amount of community cohesion and keeping people something to do and someone to meet. They make the point that the volunteers are not skilled in running a library. They're capable and competent and willing to support paid staff, but had the previous option gone forward, then they would not have been able to run a library because most of them are by now at a retirement age and that's not their skill set. So I think we need to recognise the wonderful work that they do. We also look at the library is not only a place of getting books, it's somewhere which needs to be maintained, and a lot of our libraries, such as Easthorpe Lodge in Murfield, have got a wonderful heritage there. I'd like to thank officers who did attend meetings. We had meetings, as has been mentioned, the officers attended town council meetings, and Murfield was one of those. And Amanda, I'd like to ask if officers will come out and brief town councils again, so that in a public forum in the community, people can understand what the changes are. And this will also hopefully help to give the public some confidence in the process, because far too often when reports come forward, we get a sense of apathy that people say, well, what's the point? Whoever they have made up their minds and nothing will change. Well, clearly here something has changed, and I think it shows a great maturity, and if people will come back and talk again, we can engage with the public. Again, libraries can have a wonderful influence on shaping a person and what direction they take. One of our most recent freemen, Patrick Stewart, has said in his autobiography and publicising it, of the escapism he got from borrowing books from Murfield Library. Now, I hope that no modern people in Murfield are having to go down the route that Sir Patrick did, of having to take a candle into an outside privy to read a book. But still the sense of escapism when reading a book and putting yourself in the same sphere as the hero and things like that is something we should encourage. And in bearing Patrick's words in mind as we move forward, let's get a modern library, let's get something that the community develops, and let's make it so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bolt. Councillor Pinnett, do you want to come back on that at all?
Just to say that the next consultation is for everybody. It's for all stakeholders, all partners, volunteers, library users, non-library users. It's for everyone to engage in the process.
So if I can come back, so can we have officers to a town council meeting, Amanda, please?
I'd like to say yes. I'd like to commit to that. Okay. All right. Okay.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that I have had a positive response from the Friends of Murfield Library to this report here today. So hopefully they will be engaging in the future in the consultation. And I'd like to add my thanks to all the staff and the community volunteers who have responded and worked with the council over the last few months to bring this proposal here today. And I'm really pleased to say that we have listened. Providing library services has been a really difficult challenge for a long time now. And I'm pleased to see we still have all our 24 libraries. Just before I put this to the vote of the Cabinet, Councillor Hawkins has got an expression of interest.
I do indeed, and some comments if that's all right, Chair. I am a trustee of Kirklees Community Library, which is one of the, community centre, should I say, which had the community library in it, which was one of the libraries included in this proposal. So I've had similar experiences, some similar experiences to what Councillor Taylor and Councillor Bolt have outlined. And I do just want to say I'm incredibly supportive of these revised proposals. It really shows that the council does listen to our community groups. I want to thank all the friends of groups who've been involved, the volunteers for the engagement. I've seen in Kirklees the time and effort that the friends of group put into producing very detailed reports as to the work that they do and their involvement in the library and how it could work in the future. But communication is important, as sort of both Councillor Taylor and Councillor Bolt have alluded to, with the sort of cynicism that comes with this sometimes, that this is I've heard numerous times in Kirklees, it's a done deal, by people who should know better, that when something is in consultation, it is not a done deal. It is in consultation. We're hearing thoughts from the community. And I think these revised proposals show that we listen to the community's voice. It's part of a process, and Kirklees does listen. So that's my interest and my comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So can I now put this to the vote? Can I have a show of hands of those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you. We'll move on to the next item, which is damp, mould and condensation policy. Councillor Crook.
Thank you, Leader. So this report at number 9 outlines our new damp, mould and condensation policy, which will help to further improve our approach to service need and in resolving issues of damp, mould and condensation in our housing stock. It forms part of our response to the notice to improve issued by the Regulator of Social Housing on the 6th of March this year. Since this notice was received as the result of self-referral by the service, we have seen extensive focus on improvement of processes as well as the mobilisation of significant internal and external resource, which has resulted in a marked improvement to services and standards for our tenants and a reduction in the number of outstanding cases. This new policy identifies damp, mould and condensation as an area of specific focus outside of our standard repairs policy and will further accelerate our response to these issues in compliance with the regulator's consumer standards by ensuring transparency and accountability through clear communication with our tenants and by ensuring consistent, well-managed and timely high-quality repairs. Our new policy prioritises resident safety and demonstrates a new strategy to address damp, mould and condensation with our housing stock by properly reacting to and resolving root causes, as well as by proactively addressing repairs to prevent future damp, mould and condensation cases from emerging. I'm really pleased to propose we adopt this new damp, mould and condensation policy as part of our broader service improvement and in line with officer recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Any other contributions or questions on this one? No, thank you. I must just say that I do think that the council, our role is to provide a home, and a home that is fit for purpose and not just a house or a roof that doesn't leak. So I'm really pleased to see this report here today. Can I have all those in favour, please? Sorry, the recommendation. Oh, sorry. Seconded? Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Hawkins. Right, and all those in favour? Yes, thank you very much. Oh, including myself. Right, sorry. Going on to item 10, the Inclusion and Diversity Strategy 2024-27. Councillor Pinnock.
Thank you. Thank you, Leader. Diversity is one of our strengths. Better decisions are made and greater outcomes are achieved when people from diverse backgrounds, from creativity, innovation, empathy, and social cohesion are made. Diversity helps to create a more inclusive society where everyone has an opportunity to succeed. But sadly, not everyone values inclusivity and diversity. That is why this strategy is so important. I'm delighted today to introduce this new inclusion and diversity strategy. Our vision is to create an organisation where everyone feels valued for who they are and has equality of opportunity and resources. By embracing and celebrating diversity of our workforce and the communities we serve, we build on more cohesion, innovation and effective as an organisation that delivers better outcomes for everyone. It's not just about valuing inclusion and diversity, it's about putting those values into action to better respond to the changing needs of our communities in Kirklees. The ambition is for Kirklees Council to be a positive and supportive working environment for staff, an inclusive environment for service users, and a great place to live for residents. But we know inequality Disadvantage, discrimination and disproportionality affects the lives of people and opportunities right across the board in areas like education, employment, housing, health, having to make the decision between eating and putting the heating on, mortality rate, so on and so forth. Evidence shows that if people are not given the right tools in life, this will have a long-lasting impact, putting more pressure on services and organisations, costing more in the long run. So it makes sense to tackle inequalities head-on. If a child is not given the best start in life, then as an adult, they are more likely to live in poverty, live in poor housing, have early health problems, prone to addiction, and have general lower outcomes. This then becomes a cycle of deprivation because their children go on to experience similar challenges and future generations and so on. Over the years, we have seen inequalities increase from the global pandemic, cost of living crisis, war and aggressions across the world, and most recently, the racist violent riots across the UK in an attempt to create division in our society. These events remind us that we have a long way to go to stamp out inequalities. It is important for organisations like Kirklees Council to do their part, not just to promote inclusion and diversity, but also being an exemplar for other organisations to follow. Every 4 years, the Council is required to publish one or more equality objectives under the public sector equality duty. And I'm pleased to announce that this year, the Council has identified additional priorities which go over and beyond the core requirements of the legislation. We recognise that we have a lot to do to ensure the organisation is truly inclusive. We cannot be complacent or satisfied with the status quo. Our strategy outlines 3 key elements. Firstly, we must comply with our statutory responsibility under the Equality Act 2010 and the Public Sector Equality Duty. Secondly, we have an ambition beyond the compliance. We are committed to creating inclusive places and workplaces for people to thrive. And thirdly, we play a crucial role in enabling inclusion more broadly through our partnerships as an anchor organisation, a coordinator, a facilitator, a service deliverer. We work with partners across the district to extend the impact of our inclusive organisation. We need to listen to and learn from the voices and experiences of our diverse communities and employees. We have a responsibility and an opportunity to influence and collaborate with other organisations and sectors, such as health, education and business, to promote and advance inclusion and diversity across Kirklees and the region. If we fail to do this, we risk losing the trust, respect and talent in our communities and workforce, and we miss the opportunity to create a more inclusive and innovative and effective organisation. The objectives in our strategy detail how we plan to use these 3 elements to deliver to our communities. What I won't do is go through each of them because I think we'll be here all day, but I'd like to highlight a few. We plan to utilise existing place-based work to respond to challenges in specific areas, such as interfaith and anti-racism work. We will enable the social model of disability across our services, empowering disabled people to identify and remove barriers that makes life harder for them. We plan to deliver our understanding of who accesses these services, but more crucially, who doesn't access the services, to enhance our data and plan for improvements to how residents can get the support they need. And finally, we look again at our workforce planning with inclusion in mind, being strategic about how we can develop inclusive and equitable opportunities for progression. The inclusion and diversity strategy is an important milestone in our journey to becoming more of an inclusive organisation. It builds on our recent achievements and seeks to make significant progress in meeting the current and future needs of our diverse communities and employees. The strategy outlines key areas of activities that show our organisational values of kindness, inclusion and pride in action that leads to better outcomes. It is based on engagement with a range of stakeholders, including staff networks and community groups, and the action planning behind the strategy will be regularly refreshed to remain relevant to the changing contexts and experiences of those we work with and who we serve. We are confident that this strategy will keep us on track to continue to bring to life our values of inclusion so that both our people and our communities feel valued like they belong and have equitable access to opportunities, resources and services across the district. Cabinet is asked, first of all, to note the report and secondly, to approve the inclusion and diversity strategy for 2024 to 2027.
Thank you, thank you, Councillor Pinnock. Any comments or questions on that item? No? I mean, I would just like to add that this is a really, really important strategy, and that it really underpins everything we do in terms of our economic strategy, our health and well-being strategy, all our high-level strategies, environment strategy, and of course, in particular, I think, our inclusive communities framework. We can't have inclusive and diverse workforce if we're not reflecting our community. So, Councillor Pinnock has moved that. I will second it. All those in favour, please. Thank you. Moving on to item 11. This is the Council Budget Strategy 2025-26 and future years. Councillor Turner.
Chair, thank you. The report before us today sets out our medium-term financial strategy. As always with this report, a certain amount of the information is based on the best evidence and intelligence available to us at the time of writing. So some of the details contained in this report are assumptions on what we do know and what we expect to be in the financial situation of the Council in the coming years. It's well documented that the nation's finances are in a difficult position, and this will of course continue to affect local government finances as we still rely on government funding to support vital services. These challenges didn't come out from nowhere. Austerity took 40% of our government funding away. The cost of living crisis added more than 20 million to our costs, and demand to services have been rising for many years through adult social care, SEND, etc. We've seen some councils go bankrupt, and 19 other local authorities, including in our region, receive government bailouts to set a balanced budget for this year. So it's hardly a surprise or a secret that we face a challenging situation in setting next year's budget. I have always been open and honest with residents about the challenges we face. This year's medium-term financial strategy is no different. It sets out the scale of our challenge. We need to find around 30 million savings to balance our budget next year. The MTFS describes how we are already delivering some of those savings, driving those savings, freezing most of our recruitment, eliminating all sorts of spending, and making difficult decisions about some services and investments. But we clearly need to do more. We're facing extra costs from national and demographic pressures, costs for helping people and families who are homeless, increased demand for social care for older people, and support for young people in Kirklees who need our help the most. We need to do a balanced budget. We need to balance the budget to satisfy accountants. We don't need to balance the budget to satisfy accountants or make spreadsheets look pretty. We do need to safeguard all those services that rely on sustainable funding to serve the people of Kirklees. Without balancing the budget, we would have faceless London bureaucrats making decisions on our behalf, known as commissioners. We all know they don't have a local people's interests at heart. More frontline services will be axed, and charges for residents would increase. And unlike previous years, where I would have sat here and asked for a multi-year settlement to allow us to plan longer term, along with many of our fellow councillors, I am happy to accept a one-year settlement. This will allow the new government time to develop a fair funding scheme for future years, and we would then look to have a multi-year settlement to allow us for longer, better term planning. I've said this many times, all we want is our fair share of the money available. We are not greedy. It makes no sense for much wealthy parts of the country to be able to have a lower council tax than we do and still have a bigger budget and nowhere near the same levels of deprivation. We are currently underfunded by around 80 million each year compared to other councils with similar needs to us. A fair funding settlement would make a huge difference to bridging the current funding gap. We face some financial challenges this financial year, as I presented at the last Cabinet meeting, and portfolio-owned officers are working hard to identify savings to enable us to reduce the predicted budget overspend this financial year. Looking forward, we still have to deliver significant savings in future budgets against the rise of growing demand in many areas of the council. It's always challenging when we are a demand-led organisation in many of the areas of the services we provide. We do have a very experienced team of officers who will be working hard to bring forward budget proposals in the coming months so that we can prepare a balanced budget for March's budget meeting. However, whilst the finances are challenging, both in terms of revenue spend and capital investment, and we constantly monitor our capital programme and look to repay some projects, defer others, and if we need to, we may stop some altogether. However, excuse me, it will be all too easy to paint a bleak picture looking at this report. I still believe that here in Kirklees we have a lot going for us, and we do have a bright future once the nation's finances are more robust, which hopefully will be reflected in extra funding for local council services. We will see in the next few years 2 new state-of-the-art special schools built, which will enable us to look after more of our children with SEND and also save us money on out-of-area placements. We all know that SEND is a national issue, and it's our moral duty to provide these important services and facilities for our residents. Money invested in several of our small towns to help them become more vibrant and support the local economy, creating more jobs for our residents. The larger Dewsbury blueprint moving forward. A new local plan is under development to enable us to ensure that we have the land available for our successful business to grow and to help attract new businesses and also address the national housing crisis. Working with partners, we will see growth in our social housing stock as we bring forward plans to develop sites that the council owns and can develop to help meet the needs of our residents for rented social housing. We have the station to stadium investment zone already attracting significant interest from potential investors and inward investment from the private sector, which will create the jobs of the future. We've already seen an investment on the site from our fantastic university, creating the National Health and Innovation Building, which will provide the state-of-the-art learning facility for the health service professionals of the future. The previous government had faith in us as they approved all our levelling up bids eventually. And finally, the massive investment currently in progress to bring a fast, efficient train service across the Pennines, providing better connectivity with the major economic centres of the north, namely Manchester and Leeds. Yes, times are tough, but if we work hard and take the tough decisions now, then we will see a thriving Kirklees in the next few years. This report sets out the strategy to get us through the next few years and move the borough forward to what I think and believe will be a brighter future. Chair, I ask Cabinet to receive this report and approve the strategy proposed within this report.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Are there any comments or questions? Oh, sorry, I believe... No. Oh. And Councillor Cooper.
Thanks for that, Councillor Turner. You say that faceless. We don't want things being done by faceless London bureaucrats. I absolutely 100% agree with that. But to somebody who's having services that they rely on being cut, to them, I don't think it matters whether they're faceless London bureaucrats or Labour councillors. So I 100% agree with you, but to people out there, they may not. And however we actually split the funding that is available for local government, there's not enough in the pie. The government is not providing us with enough to do what's needed to be done. So we need to be going to government and saying that the pie needs to be bigger and that there needs to be more money that's allocated to local government to provide the services that people need. And I really don't understand why national government is not actually taxing the wealthy more and actually making that as one of the things that they will do to help us actually make things stack up. Because what we've got is an unsustainable situation. We are managing decline here. We're sitting in the seats that are managing decline. And services are suffering. The levers that we used to pull to get casework and things sorted out are not as good as they used to be. The university, you referenced that. The university's got its own financial problems. It's got some huge financial problems. And so the base around us, the things that we rely on that make this a vibrant place are on fairly shaky foundations. So there needs to be a different approach from national government. There needs to be a different approach from your national government, ours, I guess. But managing decline cannot be the ongoing way of running this council or any council.
Councillor Turner?
There's quite a few questions there, isn't there, Andrew? So where do we start? You're right, there isn't enough money in the pot, and I think that's been well documented in the last few weeks that the country's finances are far from in great shape. And there's always, the government only has so much money, and as always, there is every single department within Whitehall, every single minister, every single MP will be lobbying government for more money for their department or their area, their constituency. So it's a difficult choice for government of how to do that. We have a budget coming up in October, which no doubt there will be a further update on the economic strategy for the government going forward. And we'll hopefully, we'd like to see more money. I'm not optimistic we're going to get more money from government because, as I said, the public finances are far from great at the moment. And that's what I said, a one-year settlement this year, I'd accept that. We'll give them an opportunity to work a fair funding scheme out and then a multi-year settlement. Taxing the wealthy. I totally agree. We should tax the wealthy more. The problem being is that that will take an awful lot of very complicated legislation to do that, and that is not something that can be done quickly. Because as soon as a white paper is published on any future tax rises, the big national institutions of accountants and tax advisors will go over every sentence, every dot, every T, and find all the loopholes they can, and be on the phone in 2 days to their client saying, I can save you £100,000. So it takes time to do that. As often been said, those with the broadest shoulders should share the burden, but it takes time. There's no point rushing legislation that will produce no results. And ultimately, if you look at the actual figures, the biggest payers of income tax, or the biggest source of income tax, is the middle classes. And we promised as a government we will not raise income tax. So we have to look at alternatives. Hopefully the government are looking at alternatives to raise tax. So I hope that answers that a little bit. But you're right, we need more of the pie. But as I say, everybody wants more of the pie, don't they? We've all been to birthday parties where kids try and grab the biggest piece, and that's how government works, unfortunately. Everybody wants more, but there isn't the money there. I mean, public sector debt is now 97% to GDP. How much higher do we need to go before we start to run into real financial problems? So getting the public finances on a sound financial basis, which is what I believe this government will do in the next few years, will pay dividends in the long term. Once we're on a sound financial basis, then we can look to invest. Then we can look to inject more money into various parts of the economy, whether it be the health service, whether it be local government, whether it be any other highways, etc., transport. But we've got to get those finances on a sound basis before we can make those investments. You're right, the universities have its challenges. Most universities have challenges. My understanding is that the Huddersfield University challenges are not as great as most. But they are continuing to invest. They're still looking to invest in our town. We work very closely with them, and I'm sure that they will overcome their financial problems in the next few years, and again be a major influence on the town centre economy, and invest in more buildings and create those degrees for the future, and those students who will help drive the economy and the wealth of the nation forward. I think I've covered everything there, have I not? Did I miss anything? No. All right, thank you very much then.
I'll just come back on Councillor Cooper's comments, I think, to say that there is, I believe, a world of difference between the faceless bureaucrats in London that would come in and sort us out if we were facing bankruptcy, which we are not. Yorkshire Live, we are not facing bankruptcy. And that is thanks to the work of our officers and all of our staff, not just finance staff, in terms of actually really getting to grips with the budget difficulties that we face. But if we did have faceless bureaucrats coming in from London, if we did have to go down the route of a 114, I think the public would notice the difference. There would be, I won't say no libraries, but we certainly wouldn't have been reading this report today in terms of what library provision there was going to be. All sorts of services would just disappear overnight. I think the public would definitely notice the difference. I think we have got not just a brighter future because there's a Labour government there now which will be able to in the future provide better funding, fair funding. I think because of the work of our officers and our partners like the university, etc., we've got a bright future here in Kirklees as well. Are there any other comments from members of the Cabinet? Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Leader, and again I do want to thank the officers for all the work that they've put into this, and Graham for presenting it so thoroughly. I think something Councillor Cooper has said, he does agree with us that we don't want faceless bureaucrats coming in, and I'm sure he'll be working hard to persuade any doubting residents of the same. But it is important, sort of the challenges that has been outlined, that as Graham has said as well, Rome wasn't built in a day. And the council and the country has some major challenges and some tough decisions ahead. We've seen since 2010 you can't cut your way to growth. We've seen how austerity has led us to this point. But we've also seen how uncosted promises, such as the mini budget of 22, don't take us to a better future either, have also led us to this point. The new government's got one hell of an entry, which I think will be daunting to anyone. But both the new government and we as Kirklees have to be financially prudent, but with a purpose. The purpose being making Kirklees a more equal and fairer place to live. And a new funding settlement, as Graham has outlined for Kirklees, would be a huge leap in the right direction.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Andy.
So even in these times where we're having to carefully manage the budget, we're still managing to make some massive headway in lots of ways in Kirklees. We're building great partnerships, and in the public health arena that's going to help us move forward on new activities. Councillor Turner mentioned the Health and Innovation Centre at the university, which we're hoping to work closely alongside. And all these things help us to move forward. But in-house we've been looking at the way we do things in my portfolio, finding new ways to re-enable people to make sure that they can be independent when they come out of hospital or ill health, to keep them going, and really making good use of that knowledge that we have. That's helped us limit things that people have to use, so they don't have to become disabled by their difficulties and can remain independent. We're also looking at the imminent launch of the Knoll Park House development, which is to a daycare facility helping people with dementia. And its outreach base in Almonbury, which has state-of-the-art facilities. So whilst we've had to be prudent and tighten the belts, we are still making headway with great innovations and great facilities for the community.
Thank you, Councillor Addy. Councillor Pinnock.
Thank you. I'll put my two pennies worth in as well. Thank you, officers, for the report, and Graham for outlining that. I really just want to say a little bit about, although, yes, budgetary pressures as to what this report is about, but also the opportunities that have presented themselves, irrespective of how difficult things can be. So in children's services and in education, what we've seen is the council and officers working towards trying to make savings, but at the same time embarking on improving outcomes and making services more efficient in those areas. And what I'm referring to in particular is the lack of funding that we're receiving from the government in areas like SEND, in areas where we need it the most. But what we're trying to do is be a lot more innovative. So in May 2014, we obtained planning permission for a new school to be built in my ward. And that school in particular will be dealing with children with social, emotional and mental health difficulties. It'll be a relocation of a school in Sisset that at the moment house 63 children, but when the new school is built, we're looking at 132 places. So that's definitely something to celebrate. And also in relation to the Woolley School and College, which will be a new purpose-built special school, around 180 places for children and young people with complex autism. So again, opportunities there. But, in respect of SEND and EHCPs, there are issues with those being done in a timely manner and the cost of those. And as a result of that, we've gone away and developed a new approach, which will be around schools, mainstream schools, entering into a cluster, which will be very positive because it means that it won't necessarily be tied to a particular child, it'll be tied to a school. So other young people, other children will be able to benefit from this particular cluster and the professionals who will be involved in working with the school and young people. So although things can come across as very negative, opportunities can present themselves, and particularly in areas where we can make the services more efficient and beneficial in terms of outcomes.
Thank you, Councillor Pinnock. Any further questions? No? Right, okay, well, thank you for that. Councillor Turner has moved the report. Can I second that? Are we all in favour? Thank you. Right, moving on then to item 12, Kirklees Preventing Homelessness and Rough Sleeping Strategy, 24-25, and the Temporary Accommodation Placement Policy. Councillor Crook.
Thank you, Chair. So this item seeks approval for the updated Kirklees Preventing Homelessness and Rough Sleeping Strategy up to 2029 and for the 2024 Temporary Accommodation Placement Policy. The strategy update here is a statutory requirement every 5 years and is of critical importance to Kirklees. Housing and having a safe, secure, warm and decent home, and here I just referenced Councillor Pinnock's comments earlier and thank her for those, about decent homes, is an essential prerequisite for a healthy and productive life. Health, education and training opportunities, economic inclusion and so much more is supported and enabled through this basic provision. On top of the significant direct cost of insecure housing to individuals and families needing support, the national housing crisis, and this is in no way an issue unique to Kirklees, imposes significant direct and indirect pressure on council finances. For reference, last year, temporary accommodation spend on hotel provision was £7.2 million, up from £3.1 million in 2022. The indirect cost, though, is enormous. Better health and education outcomes, which are supported by better and more stable and available housing, allow people to contribute to our collective productivity and reduce impact on health and other service demand in the future. So effective housing policy and strategy is essential for those suffering from insecure or non-existent provision, for our collective as well as those individuals' future prosperity, and to save on immediate and significant future financial cost to services. To briefly illustrate the pressure on housing in Kirklees, we have around 22,000 council homes, plus around 6,000 available in housing associations and other registered providers, against which we have a waiting list of 18.4 thousand. Per year we allocate 1,800 homes, including around 1,500 into Kirklees Council housing. Last year we conducted 1,926 homelessness assessments, so even without the 18,400 waiting already, the presentations of homeless households massively exceeds the total housing that becomes available in year. In this context, it is clear that our new Housing Solutions Temporary Accommodation Placement Policy for 2024 needs to navigate a very difficult task. It needs to manage demand for temporary accommodation and ensure that those in need are supported as well as possible within the well-publicised national service constraints. The policy rightly places emphasis on provision of warm, safe and decent accommodation, and also on helping people to remain within Kirklees as close to support networks as is possible. It rightly places emphasis on the impact of housing insecurity on children, and also on early intervention to reduce the number of households ultimately presenting as homeless. I do want to recognise here that this is a very challenging area of service delivery, and to particularly thank officers for the hard work that has gone into this policy, as well as for the care and diligence with which they support our vulnerable residents in need of support. I propose that the Preventing Homelessness and Rough Sleeping Strategy and the Temporary Accommodation Placement Policy be approved here in line with officer recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Councillor Bolt, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks to Councillor Crook for the intervention. Focusing just on one aspect of this, something which I used to ask when I was on the scrutiny panel. Firstly, could you tell me, Leader, who you've appointed as the Veterans and Armed Forces Champion since you took the administration? That would be useful for people to know. And look, reading the report, there's a graph on the strategy on page 8, which fairly difficult to read from the size of it, but thankfully from the terms of those identified as having served in His Majesty's Armed Forces, seems to show a downward trend. But I do wonder sometimes with that whether the support needs identified seem to cross over. We're all too familiar with the fact that many of our veterans, unfortunately, suffer from physical, mental or other needs, and sadly we see a huge number of people needing support who have a history of mental health problems, and obviously PTSD is a key one of that for military. So yeah, I'd be pleased to see if we could some data on rough sleepers and homeless as separate entities. They are not the same, are they? For those who are veterans, and looking at the engagement groups towards the end of the report, there is no reference in there to any veteran or military support groups, SAFA, British Legion or any of the others. Obviously those are key things in understanding the needs of our veterans community. They seem to work better from having visited a number of occasions the wonderful Tommy's Lounge just off St George's Square, where they support people. Our veterans engage better with people who have a commonality with them, and so I think we should be looking at signposting towards support groups with specific veterans' needs in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bolt. Just to answer your question about the Armed Forces Champion, it is Councillor Addy. And just to recognise as well that yes, a lot of, a large percentage of our homeless are actual veterans, ex-army personnel, etc. But I'll ask Councillor Crook to come back in on the question, on your question.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Martin, for your question and for identifying the specific group which does need special attention. I absolutely accept that. There is additional focus within the policy on groups which we know will be more likely to be subject to insecure housing, and within that group we do have veterans identified. I think that the issues that veterans suffer clearly sometimes do lead to homelessness, but it's a broader issue than just a homelessness problem or rough sleeping problem. I think the evidence, the sort of anecdotal evidence I've had from veterans that I'm friends with or know through other contacts is that they've lost more friends since they left the armed forces than they lost in armed forces, even when they've served in active conflict. So clearly a really important issue that we need to take up. As I say, that group is uniquely identified within our policy as one that we need to focus on. I very much hope we do work with, you talked about signposting to other groups that offer support to veterans. I very much hope that we do work with those groups. I'm pretty sure we do. I can see Sarah nodding there, so we do. And in particular, I've worked with, or I've been in communication with the Royal British Legion. Originally as a councillor through the COVID pandemic to identify the help they were able to offer to that demographic specifically, and it was really a fantastic package of support they were able to offer. So I'm very keen that we do work with other groups, identify all help that we can to mitigate some of the pressures on our homelessness service and on our residents and tenants who need that support. So thank you for identifying that group.
Councillor Addy.
Hi. As the Armed Forces Champion, this is not an area in my portfolio I've had a chance to explore very far, Councillor Bolt, but I'm very, very keen with a child about to enter the RAF himself. to understand more and support and advocate for those specialist groups, because I do think it is very important that those groups get promoted and people are directed towards them. Being in the health portfolio, that mental health and well-being is very important, and it is important that people get help from those that understand their needs best. So I am keen to advocate for that as we move forward into the portfolio.
Thank you, Councillor Addy. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. All I wanted to do was just to shout out to the team, because I've had experience of actually needing their support, and I was amazed at how quickly they responded. I identified somebody that was living in a tent, living homeless. Within 48 hours, they'd found them accommodation. Initially, they'd struggled because when you see somebody approaching that looks official, when you're perhaps living somewhere you perhaps oughtn't to be, you're going to do a runner. So, they were very sensitive to the needs of the individual, helped them, got them into some supported accommodation, back onto the route to being in housing. So, it's critical, the work that they do, and it's important that, we show that we're supportive of them. So, yeah, so fully supportive of this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on this? Well, Councillor Crook has moved this, and I'll second it, and in doing so, I'll just very briefly say I'm well aware that homelessness and rough sleeping has more than tripled, I think, in the years since 2010, and I'm really pleased to see that the new Labour government is putting a big emphasis on reducing that homelessness, again, certainly to pre-2010 years, if not lower than that. It has to be. It's a drain on not just our services, but it's just not right that people should have to live in that way. So I've seconded it. Are we all agreed? Can I see a show of hands? Thank you. Right, moving on to the last item, item 13, Kirklees Major Transport Capital Schemes Annual Report 2024. Councillor Crook.
Thank you, Chair. So this report includes a review of our programme of major capital transport projects, aligned with our key priorities of investing in our places and delivering a greener, fairer and healthier Kirklees, fully able to play its part and contribute to broader economic development in the region. All of the projects identified here have been previously approved by Cabinet and are funded almost entirely from external sources, as identified in the report. There is an update on active projects and those currently on a pathway to delivery, as well as information on our pipeline of projects awaiting future funding opportunities. The range of projects identified demonstrates our commitment not only to traffic improvement, but also to an increasing focus on active travel developments and modal shift, ensuring that projects in design and all future projects place emphasis on this essential shift. The focus reflects our priority to embrace the health and environmental benefits of active travel and public transport, and whilst our strategy is no way anti-car, conveys our priority to make active transport and public transport an easy and obvious choice. Delivery of these major projects runs over multiple financial years, so this report also seeks further approval for the necessary delegated authority to continue to progress delivery for the next 12 months. I propose we note the report here and approve the identified delegations necessary to progress delivery.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Councillor Bolt wishes to come in.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's interesting reading the report and the timelines for the projects. Could I ask the Councillor Crook and the officers to probably consider unifying the timelines, because some of them we've got a date on. A62 to Cooper Bridge, the anticipated end date is September 2028, which people can recognise. When I take my son to work in Leeds, I go down the M621, and the motorway improvements there are scheduled to finish in summer 2024, which the other week it was sunny, and you think, right, great, but then when it's raining, you think, have we finished summer? So anticipated autumn 2026, it would be better for everybody if we knew the date on which it was anticipated to finish, so we can then compare it. I'm pleased to see a lot of progress being made. some of the schemes are strangely lumped together. Primrose Lane and the Huddersfield Narrow Canal. You know, it's difficult to find a linkage between them, but Primrose Lane was a deficiency in the planning system, because when this council was developing the new Spen Sports, the leisure centre, the old Spen Baths, if that had been a private development, not only would we have had a section 106 to improve Primrose Lane, which goes from Bradford Road to the Greenway, but also there's a public right-of-way at the other side of the Princess Mary track, which walks up there, and we would have had that delivered as part of the planning. As it is now, we're a couple of years after it's opened, and it's slowly coming along, but I welcome that, because we have the farcical situation when the Joe Cox ride sets off every year to go to London. In order to access the Spen Valley Greenway safely, they go towards Cleckheaton first to link onto the Greenway, which adds a couple more miles to their 280-mile journey. Some of the canals are welcomed. We had a scrutiny report through council many years ago, shortly after completion of the Spen Valley Greenway, which said that the principle of developing former railway lines was something this council should pursue. Now, there are a number of former rail corridors in Kirklees. The one from Meltham coming back through Netherton is one I know residents are seeking to be developed. One which I've raised before, and in 2021 I was promised by Steve Hall at the time that I could sleep soundly in my bed because the Hetman White Ringway would be delivered. As Councillor Hawkins will know, we now have a new owner of the railway cutting, and I don't sleep soundly in my bed that the Ringway will be delivered. I don't see that anywhere on here, despite the money being available in 2021. So I think we had former rail corridors were included in the unitary plan, the local plan, and moving forward. And those are what we should. They are, as you referred to earlier, Moses, they are flat, suitable, and they're wide enough to accommodate all users. Because again, when the Spen Valley Greenway was being delivered, and people said at that time that we wouldn't be able to deliver that, it'd be a thieves' paradise and all sorts. You have walkers, cyclists, horse riders, and various other groups. You can't accommodate all those on the canal towpaths. I am surprised at the costing. Something that I was involved with many years ago. It's down here listed as Deaton to Dalton Active Travel. That's Dalton Bank Road down to Ashgrove Road. £7.5 million to upgrade what is currently a public footpath around the perimeter of Syngenta. I cycle it a number of times. The barrier to more people doing so is the former bridge over the ICI service line, which at that time Syngenta management in 2006 would have easily ceded as a route. So I can't, unless the cost, when it talks about improving Ashgrove Road, well yes, Ashgrove Road, maybe over a year ago, I think featured in a Look North TV programme about potholes as one of the most potholed roads in the country. So unless the £7.5 million includes the complete resurfacing of that, it seems a high price for what is probably at most a mile of a public footpath. But I do welcome that, because not only is Dalton Bank closed to most users at present, but even when it's open, again, looking across at Tyler, it's a 50-mile-an-hour, and his colleague on the other side, sorry, it's a 50-mile-an-hour road, single track. So for active travel users, the link between the Calder Valley Greenway or the Bradley Viaduct and Dalton Bank Road through the canal path and the link around Syngenta would be one which many would look. But I look forward to seeing these, and yes, if we can have sort of some timelines on delivery, so that when people are looking at it, the information board on the project isn't fading with the longer and longer seasons. But look forward to seeing more active travel coming along. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bolt. Councillor Crook.
Thank you, Councillor Bolt. A number of questions there. I'll start with your timeline question, which I think you started and ended with. So quite nice to bookend your question with the timeline, but I'll get back to you. I mean, end dates, I take your point. It'd be really useful if we could publish end dates. It's not always as straightforward as it sounds to predict exactly how long projects will take, when contractors will be available, when the funding will be released and so forth, but I do take your point. We will try and do better on that. You talked about some historic funding for a footpath link, Primrose Lane. I'm not familiar with the details on that one. I will, if you drop me an email, I will get back to you on that. yeah, I will absolutely get back to you. I'd like to know more about that. Really, we look for I'm keen to look for every opportunity to expand the active travel networks wherever we can. Take your point about rail corridors, fantastic opportunity for cycle paths. There's one in my ward that I use fairly regularly. They do tend to go out in one direction. You have to turn around and come back the same way. I prefer a loop, but we can't do much about that. And much less risk of falling into a canal, so that's a bonus. So I would like to keep that on track, looking at use of ex-railway lines. Yeah, I thought I'd get that in for you. The costing, £7 million for 1 mile of footpath. I can't believe for a moment that we're spending £7 million of 1 mile of footpath. So if you email me, I'm happy to look into the details around that scheme, but it does sound like there must be more going on than 1 mile of footpath. I certainly hope so. But thanks for your questions.
Thank you. Any supplementary to that?
I welcome that. And could I just ask, in terms of terminology, is pipeline the new word for mothballed?
No, I don't think so. So historically, we've not necessarily had projects ready to go when funding's become available. I think over the last decade and a half, we've seen funding move away from predictable long-term funding settlements to funding pots becoming available for individual projects, often time limited, often delivery time limited as well. So having a pipeline of projects that are paused at different phases allows us to take up any funding opportunities that become available. The history of some of those pipeline projects may be very well that funding dried up before we were able to deliver them, but I think it is a big advantage for our area to have that pipeline of projects ready to go. Oven ready, if you like.
Councillor Sokol.
Yeah, Chair, it's not a question like Councillor Bolt. I just make comment, yeah. I actually welcome the report, which is a long awaited. These projects funded by the West Yorkshire Transport Committee, yeah. I've been asking for previous cabinet member on the officer when these projects are beginning to start. So I'm pleased to see most of the projects which is mainly going to start end of in September or early in 2025, and the work will be finished. But particularly, I would like to welcome the project in my ward, Longra Lane. Longra Lane has been for years congested traffic on that, and not only peak hour, but on during the off-peak hour. So I'm well pleased. The people in the Paddock Ward and Paddock and Greenhead Ward will be pleased to know that. And I would like to congratulate the new cabinet members and the officer, particularly David Shepherd, who are working hard to bring most of these projects, not only in Huddersfield, but in Dewsbury and other places, and railway station and the Dewsbury bus station as well, Huddersfield bus station. So thank you very much for working hard on there. So I will see something happening now. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Did you want to come back on that at all, Councillor Crook?
I can briefly say that thank you very much. I share your enthusiasm for the projects we've been able to bring forward now. I think there was a difficult period of time through COVID when particularly contractor availability and costs went through the roof, and that meant that some of the projects were not deliverable within the funding envelope that had previously been agreed with West Yorkshire Combined Authority or whoever the funding body was. You'll remember last municipal year that we brought forward a plan to reprofile our capital projects within that funding stream so that we could deliver the maximum possible within Kirklees. With that funding that was available, West Yorkshire Combined Authority agreed to that in March, I think, this year, and we've hit the ground running, and there's a scheme well underway in my ward as well, so it's fantastic. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. I mean, yes, it is good to see a clear, simple report, I think, is which just does set it all out. I mean, the number of times that we've all wanted a little bit more, or to be able to have clarity about individual schemes which we know are happening, but we haven't got the detail, but it's all set out there. So Councillor Crook has moved the recommendation, which is to note the annual the annual update, but it's also to approve the necessary delegated authorities to progress the schemes as set out in the report. So I will second that. Can I see a show of hands, please? Thank you. So that's approved, and that is the end of the meeting. So thank you very much, everyone, for coming.